Hello everybody, Robin Nichols back. Today I'm talking about layer transformations. I'm talking about creating an amazing kaleidoscope style picture, how to put multiple images together to make posters, and even verging into or moving into the area of scrapbooking. Scary stuff. So what I'm going to do is show you first how to use a thing called a layer transformation to correct perspective. Why do I need to do that? Well, inevitably in our architectural or city photography, we may take pictures of buildings, of course, and if we're standing below, actually out on street level, and we're pointing the camera up, or in this case I'm on a balcony pointing the camera down, what happens is you get distortion. And so of course the legs or the pillars look as though they're actually bending in, which is pretty weird. So the architecture would probably cry in his grave if he saw what I was doing to his picture, his original building. So we need to correct that. The function we're going to use today is a thing called transformation. So guess what? The keyboard shortcut for that is Control or Command T. And when you do that, as you can see here, I've already done it, you get these little bounding boxes appear around the edge. Now, if you want to do this via the menu, we just choose Image Transform, and in this case, Control T gives you a thing called Free Transform. Doesn't cost you anything. But I'm going to choose Perspective. Now, a little bit of a problem with perspective is when you do that, when you select the perspective, nothing in the image actually changes to say, hey, Robin's in perspective mode. The only way to find out is to try it. Now, the idea is we actually want to pull the bottom of these pillars. The right-hand pillar needs to go to the right, the left-hand pillar needs to go to the left. So if I grab this corner left bounding box and drag it to the left, oh, hey, look at that. It not only pulls that pillar to the left, but it actually pulls the right-hand pillar to the right. How cool is that? That is very, very cool. But you'll notice when I do that, it kind of looks as though the pillar's actually getting a little stumpier because it kind of compresses the image up the top. As you saw here, you've got to be really careful about pulling this around because I can also change the perspective up and down as well. So I'm just going left and right for the time being. And I'm going to get them approximately vertical. And don't forget, in the navigational aid department, under View, we can say, let's have a look at the grid. And this will help you, once I fix it, this will help you see how your perspective is fixed. Now, this is the default grid. It is horrible. It's like looking at graph paper. You can barely see the photo behind it. So we need to go and choose or get the preferences and change it from the horrible default. Here it is, Guides and Grid. Okay, we need to change it to something a little bit more usable. Number one is I'm going to click on the little grey box and change the colour so we can have a nice red grid. Number two is I'm going to say percent. We don't want a grid line every 1%. We want a grid line every 25%. Okay, and we're going to have subdivisions, I don't know, 2. Click OK, and that is now your new default grid. So that's a lot easier to see, isn't it? Okay, so back to this. We need to choose Image, Transform, Perspective. And then we'll just pull this out to the left, and the right-hand one goes out to the right. See, now it's a lot easier for me to see that, well, okay, that's pretty good. A lot of this transformation business is all about multiple actions. It's rather like selecting, working with the layers, or changing color to black and white, and those kind of transformations in terms of tonal transformation. It's not just one action. We probably need to go and change a color image to black and white, and then fix it up with levels. There's always an extra stage in here. So, as I said, this image shrinks in its height, or appears to. So the next stage is to select another transformation, and this time I'm just right-clicking in the photo. You can, of course, go up to the Image Transform menu, and I'm just going to choose Free Transform. So that unlocks this unique characteristic of pulling both sides out at the same time, and I'm just going to grab the bottom and distort the image just by stretching it down just a little bit. Like that. So just to put back into it the height that we lost when I pulled the outer edges to the left and to the right in the perspective transformation. So now if I turn my grid off, you can see I've actually transformed that picture amazingly to look close to, or very close to, let's try the grid again. That's pretty good. I might have gone a tiny bit too far, maybe, but very close to the original image. Very pleased with that. And that is a basic layer transformation in the perspective mode. Don't forget, key points here are Control or Command T. And now you can see, because I've done a bit of tweaking to this picture, the edges of the picture are way off to the left and to the right here. So Control or Command T, or alternatively I can go to the Image transform and choose one of these. What is skew and distort, I hear you say? Well, skew is very simple. Skew works mostly with the midpoints, and as you can see, the little symbol says arrow left and right, which means that I can rock and roll. So this is for correcting, obviously, any nasty slant on Italian towers taken around the Pisa region. So if you have a leaning tower, you can actually push it back upright again. So as I said, when you're transforming pictures, unless you're standing exactly at right angles to the building you're being photographing, you may find that you're standing slightly to one side. So you may need to skew it. You may need to, for example, pull the perspective up or down here to change the perspective on one side of the picture, or you may want to then go back and in distort mode just pull one corner independently of everything else and wiggle this around as well. So that's called distort. It's a fantastic little function. So transformations allow you to do a gazillion different things with your images. Let's go on and have a look at another example. Here's an extreme example here. Aldo's meats. What Aldo's meat, I don't know, but here is a very tricky one, because not only does it we have a vanishing point, and I don't particularly want to correct the vanishing point, but the building looks as though it's tilting in at the top a little bit. As you can see here, these verticals are not really vertical. So I'm going to duplicate the layer, which is a simple process of pressing Control or Command J, or I can just click this and pop it up to there. So I've got an extra layer. Control T, remember, of course, goes into transform mode. I can right click and choose, let me see, perspective, I think, and I'm going to try it up the top here. There we go. So I'm just going to get those verticals looking a little bit more vertical. That's pretty good. I'll click OK for the time being. I'm going to go to the View menu and just get Mr. Grid on the scene here. That's not bad. I'm thinking that the vertical line on the left-hand side is pretty close to vertical. Might have actually gone just a little bit too far, so I'm just going to undo that and try that again. So it is actually quite hard to get it totally. That's about right there. But I'm going to go to distort mode because I just want to pull this a little bit more to the right. There we go. Now I'm going to go into perspective mode. I'm going to press Control minus on the keyboard to shrink it down a bit. And I'm just going to try and just change the perspective. Now you can see here, of course, it's kind of shrinking the Italian butcher's window a little bit, a bit weird. So I'm going to go back and just choose scale. I can lose a little bit of this orange wall on the left-hand side, and I can lose a bit of that wall of the next shop on the right-hand side, just to bring it back to normal, or what we'd like to call normal. There we go. Okay, now let's have a look and see how we've gone here. So that's the new version, and that's the old version. So I've really tightened it up, tidied it up, made it look a little bit more presentable using my layer transformations. Very, very powerful feature in Photoshop Elements. Now we're going to probably move on a little bit away from transformations and just look at multiple images on a single layer. And here I've got a picture of a very iconic building, just happens to be the Sydney Opera House, and it's a little bit underexposed, so I'm going to fix it up very briefly using Mr. Levels here, which is Control, of course, or Command L on the keyboard. Okay, and that's reasonably good. And I'm going to make a thing called a kaleidoscope, and I'm sure as a kid you may have had one of those little tubes filled with little beads and bubbles and baubles and mirrors, so that when you rotated the tube it created an amazing kaleidoscope pattern. So it's going to be something similar to that. So we need to make a blank document in order to place our Opera House pictures, because we're going to reproduce these or duplicate these multiple times and flip them around. So what I normally do is I just start by choosing New Blank File, which as you see is Control or Command N, and it comes up with a dialog box that says, hello Robin, what size blank file do you want to start with? So I'm going to say, because we're international, we're not US over here, so I'm going to choose International Paper A3. That's just the biggest one they got. I'm just very lazy. It's the largest size, and you can see in inches it's 11 by 16 inches. I'm not sure how that equates in American terms. But anyway, it's the biggest sheet of paper. And it's vertical. So I'm going to choose Image, Rotate, 90 degrees left, whatever. And then I'm going to go back to my Opera House picture. And in fact, I'm going to use the photo bin technique for this. There is my white sheet of paper. I'm just going to push the Opera House thumbnail into the white sheet of paper. Bingo, it arrives. Now, deliberate error. I created a new document, and I'm just going to undo that. I created a new document, but this new document is black and white. Do I want to save it? No, I don't. So let's create a new document. We're going to choose International Paper A3 and make sure this time it's a RGB color document. I looked at it and I thought 16 megabytes is not very big. 50 megabytes is the size of an A3 document. So again, you can't tell because it's just obviously black and white. I'm going to rotate it, and then I'm going to push the Opera House into it and let go. This time the Opera House will appear in color. So the idea being is I actually want to get 4 of these Opera House images all up on the same frame. So here's where my grid helps me, because I can grab a corner and shrink this down so I know that's actually half size, and if I push it around I know that's actually going to fit perfectly. So I'm going to click OK. I'll turn grid for the time being, and I'll turn the bounding box off as well because that's a little bit disturbing. Are you disturbed? Yes, I am. Okay. So what I want to do is duplicate these layers, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. How do we duplicate a layer? Very simply, Control or Command J. I can go to the layer menu and choose duplicate layer, or I can push the layer up onto the create new layer label. Now the disturbing thing about that is I've just done it. You can see in the layer palette I've done it, but nothing changes in the image because my duplicated layer is sitting right on top of the previous layer. So Mr. Move tool, which is V on the keyboard, allows me just to move that image to the right hand side. How cool is that? But what I want to do is I want to transform or flip this layer. How does that happen? Well, I basically want to turn the Opera House and have it pointing the other direction. It's going to kill the original designer when he sees what I'm doing, but you know, you've got to do these things in order to be creative. So we go to the image menu, and instead of rotating the entire image, we go down to the bottom, down here to flip layer horizontal. So it's very specific. If I choose flip horizontal, the whole image will just turn around, which is what I want. I want to actually be specific and flip the layer horizontally. There we go. So that was pretty cool. And as you can see, there's still a little bit of a white line between the two photos. So I'm just going to use the keyboard arrows just to crank it 2 clicks, and it's basically 2 pixels closer together, and those 2 layers now form a perfect, I hope, there we go, perfect junction. To be on the safe side, I'm going to lock these 2 layers together because I don't want to accidentally do that and mess up my beautiful arrangement that I've got happening here. So how do I do that? I hold the Shift key down and click on the layer that is not selected. So making sure that one of those 2 layers is selected. Do not do this because you'll select and lock one floating layer onto the concrete background, which you don't want. So choose one of the non-background layers, hold the Shift key down, and then click a second time, and you've got them locked. So now when I move them, they both move together. For safety's sake, I can choose from the menu to link them, and that's linked, as you can see, the little orange chain symbol. Even more safe, I can choose to merge those 2 layers together. So now we've got the 2 layers, it's just occupying one layer here, which makes it a bit more convenient, like that. So let's go and duplicate this layer again, and you have the same problem. It duplicates them, but they're on top of each other. Let's pull this down to the bottom. Wow, so I've got 4 Opera Houses. Okay, so what's Robin going to do now? I need to go and choose image transform, or image rotate, should I say. A bit of a weird when you say rotate. You don't, I suppose you do want to rotate it, but in this case, I want to flip it vertically. Okay, whoops, that's a deliberate mistake. Now I've flipped the entire image vertically, which is not very good. I need to flip the layer vertically, so I fell into my own trap there. Down here, flip layer vertical. Bang. So now you see where I'm coming from in terms of kaleidoscope image, and I'm just going to nudge that up. We have a really amazing result simply by taking one image, duplicating it, flipping it, merging it to the original duplicated layer, and then duplicating that again, flipping it, and nudging it together. Finally, in this little exercise, I'm going to take my crop tool and I'm going to crop the image like this, just to the edge of the photo, and click OK. How's that? Pretty cool, eh? So you get a very surreal looking result of that, and I call it kaleidoscope image. You will be amazed at what you can create from the most innocuous looking images. Try it for yourself. Now moving on, we've created essentially a multi-image illustration here in this Opera House kaleidoscope shot. What I want to do is show you how to create a poster. So let's say we've got this little shot here. Again, I'm going to start off by creating a poster background, so we can create the poster to whatever size you want. Let's just change it to inches, and let's say we want it 12 inches wide, and we want it the good old 12 by 16 by 12. I think we're going to go 16 inches wide. Let's be really ambitious, and we're going to go 24 inches high. Okay, I don't want grayscale because we're going to go color. Whoops, go color, Robin, go color. Thank you. 98 megabytes. Okay. So I'm going to then go back to my photo bin, and I'm going to push this picture into there. This is my corrected perspective picture. I'm going to press Control or Command T, just shrink it down a little bit and reposition it and say OK. Now I need to go and find a few more pictures to put into my poster. Okay, before we go any further though, it's a good idea to save your image, because if you spend a little bit of time transforming and basically being very creative, it'll be a real shame if you have a power cut or goodness knows what and you lose the lot. So clearly we have to save this as a Photoshop file because we've got more than one layer. So let's go and get another picture. Another way to get pictures into your poster is just basically to select them, and we do this by using Select All, which is Control or Command A, and then Edit Copy, which is Control or Command C, and then we go back to the poster and we choose Edit, Control or Command Paste. Okay, and that's, I suppose, an old-fashioned way, I call it old-fashioned way of dragging images in there rather than just pushing them up from the base, which is what we can do here. So I'm going to close that picture down now. We don't need that. Here's a street scene. We can push that in there. And here's a nice picture I'm going to use as the background. And here's me having a cup of tea in the cafe. Okay, then I'm going to save it, which is Control S or Control or Command S. You know, get in the habit of saving as much as time. So now you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers happening here. It's a bit complicated because this top layer, the tea shop, is actually covering everything else. But I want to use this nice shot as a background layer. So I'm just going to leave that as is, but I'm going to drag it down to the bottom because that's the background. So now I can see other pictures on top. I can start resizing and designing and reshaping. So Control T, I think I said, for my PC, of course, is the ability to shrink this down in size, and I'll click OK. You can kind of do this as many times as you like in terms of shrinking down. Let's have a look at that. This is just a street scene, so I think I'm going to transform this down. One of the most annoying things about this new version, version 12 and version 11, is every time you use a new tool, you get the little options palette popping up and going, hello, here are the options. Very, very annoying because I seem to spend all my time shrinking it down to nothing. So we're going to put that there. I'm going to shrink this down to a little bit smaller, something like that. And then I'm going to make this the same size or the same width to try and match. Just eyeball it in there, something like that. Okay, probably looks all right. Something like that, and I'm going to, whoops, that's way off target there. Don't forget you can use the arrows on the keyboard, very, very handy for us to do this. In fact, I might just hide that layer for the time being. Wow, you can do that. Yep, you just click on the eyeball. If the eyeball's got a line through it, can't see the picture, which is fantastic. I might even just try this a little bit different. Let's put this here so we can see the shadows of people. There we go. And I might put that in there. Okay, so I've made a multi-image poster very, very quickly. Do you remember what we did? Because we've got a white background, I can take the Damascus street scene, absolutely wonderful city to photograph in, very kind, very sociable people. I've been there 4 times and have just found to be incredibly hospitable, polite, sort of correctly behaved people. So I just don't know what's gone wrong there. I guess they've just got a government that's just a little bit different. It's such a shame. And I'm going to bring the opacity of this down just a bit. Okay, and as you can do that, you see the images in the front become more dominant. If I have it at 100%, they're kind of competing against each other. So don't forget, you can always bring the opacity in this case of the background image, down a little bit in order to make your poster, your multi-image poster, appear a little bit more useful, a little bit more dominant. Don't forget also I can get in there with the effects, styles and drop shadows, and I can put a little drop shadow on some of these just to lift them off the background. That's a little bit on the heavy side. Yeah, maybe something like that. And we can just mess around with all these, and I can just put a little drop shadow on all my 3 layers simply by just jumping in and out of the effects department. There we go, and that makes it a little bit stronger. So that's all about working with layers, creating some amazing results using multiple images to create multi-image documents, using layers and layer transformations to create fabulous illustrations. Have fun.